Hey guys, welcome to another live episode of the Aspiring Entrepreneur. Kind of coming in midday here. During it's about 10:30 Pacific time. We're about halfway done with the trading session, a little more than halfway done. I didn't get a chance to trade this last few days. I've been extremely busy with other projects, and so I apologize. Um, I've been trying to recreate the channel and kind of generate interest in live trading at 6 o'clock. And so didn't really see a lot of the interest there the last couple weeks, and so I got busy with other stuff. But I do promise to jump back on, hopefully soon. I will announce that. But I figured I should come on at least just talk about some of the stocks and the things that I'm seeing. A lot of good action, a lot of good price action. I figured we could just start off with Tesla. I've been trading of various plays. I did trade Netflix, been trading silver, some of our usual suspects. So Tesla, again, going back, almost a month ago, we talked about that 490 complete resistance, couldn't break it, and we've been selling off since. We do have earnings tomorrow. I believe it's pre-market, and so that's super exciting. Just the way everything looks set up wise, I mean, we could gap up, but most likely we're looking at gapping down. Our 200 day is closer to 378. And so I really wouldn't get involved going into earnings just because this could move anyway. Just based on the chart, my feeling is we're going to come down here close to the 200 day. Looks like a good support at 385. Possibly open up closer to 400. And so I don't expect the earnings to be solid. We're still in negative momentum. We're not quite oversold on the stock yet, and we've been trading sideways. And so we couldn't beat that 500, but we're testing the low of the consolidation here at 390. And so I expect something down here and then a rip back up eventually to through 500. And again, I could be completely wrong, and we could completely gap up on earnings, but I don't see that play here, especially with all of the kind of average 20 day, 50 day, and 200 day, especially the 20 50 kind of sloping negative. I don't see the strength in the stock. I don't see why we would want to gap up. And if you're playing options play, you can buy puts down here, small size. If you feel confident that this is going to sort of sell off after hours, or sorry, pre-market once the earnings comes out, and you can always buy puts and see. And if you're wrong, you can essentially lose a premium, or you can potentially 4 or 5x your premiums. And so that's what I'm looking at. If I'm looking long Tesla, is buy down here. And like I said, I'm just not that confident that we're gonna get something up higher. I just don't see why that would be the news. We've had a great run, essentially from $200 up to 500. So we've essentially gone 2.5x. There's no reason why I would think that the stock would do anything else. Um, for App Lovin, I mean, this was again, I did call it the trade of the year back here on this day, and I just don't see how, unless you're doing momentum stocks, this is really the trade of the year. I mentioned that I had bought puts right back here for a flush back down, and we've gotten just an amazing amount of flushing. And honestly, I've still mentioned long term, I am long the stock. I don't have a long position now, but this is where I would be buying. Was close to the 500 range. We got here. I think it was like 508. It was like 509 this day, a couple days ago. And so this is where I would be looking at is right here at the 200 day at 490, right under 500 bucks. There's a lot of negative news on this stock right now in terms of accounting. It's literally just like the SMCI. I mentioned to you guys that this stock was trading a lot like SMCI, had a massive run. Just like SMCI, you get this negative news. Anytime these stocks are squeezing, 100, I think it was like 1,000% from, down here about a year ago, a year and a half ago, you get this negative press. And so the stock has been kind of adjusting to that news, but I'm still long term. I think this is just a consolidation range for us to make our next range. And guys, this consolidation range is, north of 700 down to 500. So this is a 200, essentially $50 range for consolidation. So it's extremely risky. Obviously, there's a lot of downside risk to the stock. And so if you do feel long term and you're passionate about it, again, we're close to the 200 days. So it's not like we're trading something that's like up here where it was 730 and the 200 day was half of that. We're pretty close to the 200 day. I would just manage your risk. It's a big, it's an expensive stock. My If I were to sort of guesstimate where this thing goes, it is part of the S&P. So it is part of the index. And so what I see this thing going to is eventually to $1,000 and doing kind of what we've seen as a post split. And so as the stock gets more expensive, and it's going to be harder for a lot of traders to trade, I can see this doing like a 10 for 1 stock split. And so again, I wouldn't mind buying it down here, realizing that we're still uptrending, right, significantly. In terms of cutting it, just manage your risk, whatever that risk looks like. But this isn't something where you're going to go heavy and risk your whole portfolio, right? But again, if you were, back here, obviously hindsight, it'd be easy to say like, well, I wish I got in. MU, just a great stock, complete squeeze, really no dip buying on this stock at all. I mentioned to you guys one of my last plays was on this day right here, which was earlier this month. I was selling puts as we were tanking. Clearly, just making new legs up almost every single day. It's just been a great stock. I had a small short position. I believe it was on this day here. This day here, I had a small short position just based on the setup that I was seeing the day previous. Let me show you guys what that looks like, what I was seeing and why I went short. Because you may say, well, why would you short a stock? It's more intraday moves. I mentioned to you guys I don't necessarily swing positions, but basically I saw that this thing was holding and trying to break VWAP and it kept bouncing off and it wouldn't break. And so this is a VWAP line and it wanted to break, but it kept getting bought up. And then you can see that it gapped up and then completely sold off. And so once that selling move, pressure moved happened, which is what it was trying to do on this day. Let me see if I can show you guys because the 15-minute doesn't show the VWAP line. So let me show you guys what that looks like. It's actually a really good trade. Obviously timing stocks is extremely difficult, but if you can time them and you can see understand the kind of the move. Um, let me see here. So let me show you guys what I meant. So basically on this day, you can see here, right? So we're trading off VWAP bouncing, trading off VWAP bouncing, trading off VWAP bouncing, final bounce, right? So clearly this thing was when it bounces out much, it's trying to break it, but there's a buyer. And so then it started to gap up and I was confident in this trade. And man, we just flushed everybody out at the open with all that volume, selling volume, and then we got bought up. So again, MU been just solid stock. Again, not something I would be buying long term at these price levels. I would be waiting for a correction, closer to the high threes. It's a squeeze stock, and so you're overbought. You're at high momentum. It's not something I would try to get into a long position on. If you look at the weekly chart, you're up in the air, and so anything that comes up has to come down, right? So it's not something I'm interested in. But intraday trading, day trading, that's fine. That's something I'll do all day, every day. Probably one of my, I would say, I don't know if I want to call this my most disappointing trade of the year. It probably is. I had mentioned on the channel that I was looking at buying this day. I had bought in some calls for us to break through um back into here. Hold on, I'm still on my weekly chart, back into 280. So it was this day here. They had gapped up on, I mean, they're getting a lot of price raise targets. So I bought calls. I saw that, we weren't necessarily overbought or anything, but it looked like, we were gonna now, after this failed attempt, reattempt and to break into this level I call the 300 level, at least short term 280. And so I bought these calls up here, and it was this day here. I was really in the money, and I only sold 20% of my stake, understanding that we were going to hopefully break what I call the trend line. I had drawn the trend line back here as what I call the resistance trend line because we're not breaking it to get into this sort of consolidation zone of higher highs. And so you can see we bounced right off of that, which happened to also be the 50-day, and we sold off. And so I had only sold 20% of the position, carried the rest thinking we were going to continue higher. And then you can see I completely got flushed out. And so I would say it's probably the most disappointing trade of the year just because when you sort of see that setup, what you feel like is a good setup, what you feel like is a good flush, like I mentioned, not being able to retest that level up here and have that failed zone and then have this sort of gap up. And just to know that the gap up essentially got sold off and then it got gapped up and again it sold off. So it just now we've closed that gap. And so we mentioned this trade back here about closing this gap. So the gap is closed, but I had near-term options, so those options are essentially worthless at this point. So it's not worth anything. And so again, if you have long-term options, you're not probably worried about short-term fluctuations. Um, and this is probably even a good time to buy, like rebuy those options. But the trade I was looking at was more of a short-term swing, so that's going to be a hit for myself. SPY, sold off, still kind of in that consolidation zone, breaking, that 700 range. Had a good sell off, and again, we just closed that gap, ramp right back up. Stocks are looking great. Again, mentioned to you guys how bullish it's been. Silver, probably my favorite stock of the year. I trade this daily. I saw the squeeze yesterday, and sure enough, once we got to 106, completely sold off. And we look at this gap here, and you can see it's holding trend, but you'll see that this thing will flush. And so I mentioned yesterday when I saw this move before it tanked, I said this is exactly when you want to get involved, right? So you don't want to get involved on these chops. You want to get involved where you have a massive gap, and then it squeezes shorts out, and then it completely sells off to tell you that look at the pressure. I mean, that volume, you thought you had high volume all these days. Look at this volume here, right? It's like essentially 3x the biggest days. And so this was a lot of selling pressure. And so this was a good sign. I mean, a great short. If you bought puts, you want confirmation. It's not quite there yet. But when I see this type of a candle, I'm definitely buying puts down here. At least short term, you could go 93. Longer term, you can come in here, but this is a candle where I can see us flushing and then coming back up to retest. Okay, so I don't expect this selling pressure. I expect us to sell off and then to come back up and retest. Okay, because silver is still hot. It's just you're gapping from. I remember this stock I had bought, I think it was down here. Yeah, I had bought along, sold into close, and then I'm looking at 20 points in a matter of 3 trading sessions, right? So here is the low is $82. The high here is 106, guys. I mean, that's just an insane 24-point move in 3 sessions. That's a 20+% return. So an amazing move on that. And like I said, this is the candle I would wait for a heavy short. I'd be going heavy short on this stock. It looks like you're risking here the high of where we opened, which was 99. And like I mentioned, if this thing wants to be finicky, that's fine. We could look at the intraday move today on silver. Let's see here where we're at. So you can see we're kind of bouncing off, but secondary support on that 96 level, but that's going to fail. Once we get the buyers out, this thing will close up pretty low. So we'll get down here, and it looks like we did that after hours right here where we had the 92 sell off, and then they thought shorts were probably either swinging, so it gaps up. You can reload your short and then reshort that position. So again, not looking to long silver until we close some of these gaps, probably in the mid 80s. But great trade, man. This would probably be my stock of the year, even though it's only January. I've been trading it pretty consistently. Netflix, one of my probably worst trades. Also, not really happy about it. I had basically saw the tank, didn't get involved, got short on scalp trades, and then we ended up. I was waiting for a gap down or a sell off into open, and we ended up just essentially reclaiming a lot of what we lost. And so got squeezed out of this move, shorted up here, got some of that back, but it wasn't a good trade. Not proud of it. Kind of earned myself a timeout, probably on this trade. Just you have a good sell off. You want to see how much you can reclaim and then reclaim a short. You don't want to short into what was already a sell off, and it reclaimed a lot of it. In fact, I think it closed the gap yesterday. So it looks like Netflix even closed the gap that it created right here. So yeah, 87, and yesterday's high was essentially 87. So it wasn't a good trade. Not proud of it. Intel I didn't trade, but I was watching based on earnings because we were squeezing up here, and then we had to sell off. People were probably buying around the 20-day. What I was watching was what we call the 3-day rule. And so when you have earnings, here's my daily chart. So you have 1, 2, 3 days, and so you kind of see where your bottom's at and where your risking is. So if I'm going long Intel, I'm looking at that 40. What is this? The 42 kind of 30, 42.50 level, and I'm going for a long to get back up, at least close a gap into 45, give you about a 10% return. So again, there's some good swing ideas on some of these sell-offs, but if you're buying first day, you're off. Buying second day, you're risking and you're losing. Third day, you kind of have levels established now. So you want to wait 3 days, especially when a stock's weak. Like I mentioned, Netflix, there was no 3-day because it ended up just reclaiming what it lost. So that was kind of an interesting move. I put GME on my stock just because it is squeezing. It was at $20. It's gone up about 20% the last few trading sessions, and it had a squeeze yesterday. And so we know this stock, it trades sideways at a very tight range. It can squeeze up. And there's some news with Ryan Cohen, and it looks like he bought, what was it, a million shares at 2160. So if the CEO is buying a stock, that's always going to generate some new news. The most fascinating stock I would say is probably BNI. I was driving to Southern California on Friday, and I this never happens. So for a stock to essentially do this on a Friday was very odd. I would say isn't something normally you see. And so Friday afternoon, this thing had kind of a run up, which looks very small now, but I think it got up to around 18 bucks, sold off, didn't quite sell off, and then all of a sudden, I remember I was driving and it was like $27, and then the next thing I checked, and it was all of a sudden all the way up to like 80. And so, or it got up to here to 70 or 70, 68. And then we gapped up right at open at till 82, and then we held trend, and then we sold off yesterday. Now, the crazy thing about yesterday was how the stock sold off completely. It was shorts all day, and then it completely reclaimed and actually got higher. And so you actually have a green candle for yesterday. So we actually opened lower than we closed, sold off, reclaimed, and then got in. And so today you can kind of see the core of this stock is right here in the sort of 40s, mid 40s. We held the trend. A lot less volume today. It's a lot less volume. I think that we're at like 5 million shares as of this recording. So we're probably going to close around 6, maybe 7 million shares. And you can see that same idea. We gapped up or we went up. Again, this is, this move is 20 points, and then we're selling off again. And so again, it's a interesting stock, but this is where people are getting margin called, and they have to cover their positions, they have to cover their shorts, and they get squeezed out, and the stock doesn't completely sell off to the folks that are down here. And so they either they add to that position and they get out here, or they're just stuck. And so that's what this is going to do. It's going to hold trend, and eventually it'll sell off. It's just a squeeze play, momentum play. Nothing that exciting about the stock. I think it has like 30 employees and it's valued so high. So yeah, it looks like it's, 6 million shares, and $220 million. And so at, what is it? What was the stock? It was literally $3, a couple weeks ago. So take it for what it's worth. But with that said, there's a lot of momentum stocks. There's stuff every day going on. So you just want to be careful with these momentum stocks, guys. You want to have a good risks plan. I got squeezed out. Not squeezed out. It was took a significant hit on a stock a couple weeks ago. I think it was VERO, waiting for a reclaim because I had some FOMO action from the night before. And yeah, so you can see here. And so I had some FOMO up here, ended up taking a hit, and the stock is back to where it belongs, which is essentially nowhere, $1.20. So yeah, I took a hit, didn't trade the stock well. It just squeezed and just completely sold off. So just be careful with the momentum stocks. You want to get out. Like, that's why I don't swing, right? If you try to swing along, you're you're essentially have lost 90% of your fund. So don't want to do that. Protect capital at all costs. That's the rule of the game. And so, just keep in mind that you want to just not risk anything. And, I would, recommend try to have a risk plan before you get into a trade. So, all right, guys, good luck with trading, and I will talk to you guys later.